For those of you who know a little bit about mental health, for those of you who took a psychology class or are interested in psychology, this lecture is going to be horribly oversimplified, and you're going to be pulling your hair out saying it's not exactly like that. I know. I'm trying to squeeze it into less than half of a lecture. But this is the best I can do. Okay, so remember, health is actually three things: physical, social, and mental, right? Remember that? Okay, mental health has always been a serious issue among the population, among humans. It's just that until relatively recently, until only 50 years ago, the majority of the population has been ignoring it. They've been pretending it doesn't exist, and anytime a family member or somebody you know starts to show the symptoms, the signs of a mental health disorder, then they are quickly hidden from the general population. They're called crazy. Before that, they were called possessed by a demon, and the family did everything they could to not let the rest of the village find out, because it was like they took it as a sign that the family was tainted, not that the individual needed medical help. Nowadays, the American public, at least, and the general developed world has been more aware, more understanding of mental health issues, and in the past couple of decades, actually society has gotten better and better at providing support services, to the point where today, as of last year, we even have a separate number to call if you or somebody you love is having a mental health crisis, and that is 988. It's not 911, it's 988. So they have trained people, and of course, since it's only a year old, they're still fixing it. Okay? Nothing is ever perfect right out the door. There's always improvements to be made. So if you ever tried it, or if you heard any complaints about 988, it means that it's a new program. 911, after all, has been part of our culture for, I don't know how long. As somebody in EMS, I should know that kind of information. But 911 has been around for a long time, and there's still complaints about it. It's still not as efficient as it could be. It still can be improved. So 988 is early in this process, in this life cycle. But anyway, at least now we have that number. Okay. The difference between mental illness and mental disorder is that the illness is the bigger category. When you have a disorder, when it prevents you from fulfilling your other responsibilities. If it prevents you from holding down a job or doing well enough at your job, it prevents you from getting good grades when you would otherwise have gotten good grades. It prevents you from meeting your part of the relationship with your family, with your loved ones, with your significant other, then it's a disorder. If you are doing great at your job, your boss loves you, everybody loves you, you're employee of the week like more times than not, you're getting straight A's, your significant other thinks you're God's gift to them, then you don't have a mental health disorder. You have a mental health. You may have a mental health illness, but it's not preventing you from meeting your responsibilities. Okay, so here, this looks like a Facebook quiz or something like that, or something you pull down off of the internet. But so I'm not going to read this to you. It's a wall of text. You can read this for yourself, and you probably have heard all of this in your own life. Okay, so there is a textbook on mental health disorder. This is by the American Psychiatric Association, is their official book where they wrote this all down, and it's a Diagnostic and Statistic Manual of Mental Health Disorders, version 5. They don't have a version every year. It's just when they feel like a significant enough change is required, then they come up with a new version. For example, I think it was the DSM-3 that categorized lesbian and gay mindset as a mental health disorder, a mental health illness. Of course, it doesn't do that on the version 5. So the American Psychiatric Association's awareness of mental health is evolving over time. I only mention this book, but I do not recommend you get it. It's expensive, it's big, but also it's a dangerous tool. It's about as dangerous as I recommending that you buy a sharp sword. Okay? Yes, this book has its uses, but in the wrong hands, it can do real harm. When I was in medical school, we all had to get the book, and the first month of having this book, we were diagnosing each other left and right and causing ourselves anxiety, like run at the beginning of class, we would run to each other and say, hey, check this out. Do you have, and then start going through this checklist. And then finally, the professor had to like stop us and say, everybody, shut up. You are all fine. There's nothing wrong with you. Put those books down. So this is a tool. It can be used for good or evil or both. So unless you know, tools need to be used by expert hands, by wise users. So unless you know what you're doing, don't get the book. Okay, stress, very much. So the most common mental health complaints nowadays being reported are two groups: too much stress and anxiety, and depression, mood and depression. So stress, then first of all, some definitions here. Can you read this? I think I'm zoomed out too much. Check my screen. Am I centered? Stress is your psychological response to some event. The event is the stressor. So taking an exam is a stressor. Overdue bills is a stressor. What you feel because you are dealing with these stressors is the stress. When you take a psych class, if you take any kind of psychiatry class, then you have to know that in their view, stress, the official formal structure of stress is the general adaptation syndrome. Test question. There are 3 phases in the general adaptation syndrome. Alarm is the appearance of the stressor. Resistance is your body's response to the stressor, so you're feeling the stress. And the whole point of that is to maintain your body in a sense of balance. You are doing 1,000,001 things to stay in balance. When you are dehydrated, you get thirsty. When you are overhydrated, you want to pee. When you are chilly, like today, unseasonably cold for this time of the year, you shiver. When you are when your temperature, internal core temperature rises too high, you start to sweat. These are all feedback loops to keep your body in a point of balance, which actually is called homeostasis. But I guess you don't need to know that for this class, the word. Anyway, as long as you maintain this balance, despite the stressor pushing from one direction or the other, then you are resisting the stressor by staying in balance. Then one of 2 things are going to happen. The stressor will go away, which means the incident is over, the event is over, and now you no longer have to resist because the stressor is no longer there, and so it's done. It's over. Whatever was stressing you is over. Or the stressor is still there, but your ability to resist the stressor is completely depleted. Your energy levels are all used up. You're out of caffeine. Your mental ability to handle it is done. And that's called exhaustion phase. So you are literally exhausted. You want to resist the stressor, but you can't. So what are examples of the exhaustion phase that you may see in yourself or others? Well, there's burnout, there's a nervous breakdown, or you just give up. So worry exhaustion. I think that's what it's called. The exhaustion of worrying. You just stop worrying. and that's the exhaustion phase. Okay. With too much anxiety or depression, then suicide is a very real thing here. In fact, the spate of celebrity suicides a few decades ago is what may have started this entire social awareness of mental health to come out on the surface. People, 50 years ago, people went on their lives pretending this doesn't exist. Mental health is not a thing. And then one by one, famous people they loved and adored, cherished, were committing suicide. And then thereafter, in part of that news craze, the loved ones of the celebrity, relatives, best friends, would then get in front of the microphone and say, I never knew, I wish they told me about it, I would have done something, etc., etc. And so the shock of the suicide, the celebrity suicide, grabbed people's attention so that they listened to these other people saying, I wish I knew, I wish they had said something. And I think the message finally worked its way into the population so that more and more people became receptive to listening to their friends, asking their friends, are you okay? I care about you. Is there anything you want to talk about? And that's how you deal with suicide potential. If there's somebody you do care about and you're starting to suspect something is up, go ahead and ask. That is a common misconception about suicide. There is a public misunderstanding that don't mention suicide, you may put the idea in the head. Look, anybody who's ever been depressed has thought about suicide. Justified or not justified, a lot or a little, the word suicide has always come up. Even today, it comes up in casual conversation. Oh my God, I can't find my pencil, I want to kill myself. It's just so casually mentioned today. So you don't have to worry about mentioning it to your friend. Okay, they've already heard it, they've already thought about it. However, here's the thing. Suicide, along with some of these mental health issues, is when the logic in the mind has broken. Don't try to use logic for some of these mental health disorders. Their logic is broken. It goes like this. If somebody has a bone disease, like a genetic bone disease, it's not their fault, it's not their parents' fault, it was a recessive gene, the parents never knew, it just ran it was there in the genome, the DNA, under the radar for hundreds of thousands of years, and then finally it just surfaced here with this person. And so their bones are too weak, they cannot carry anything heavy. Every time they try to lift something heavy, they break a leg. You do not tell this person, why are you so weak? Why can't you pull your own weight? Look at me, I'm carrying a full pack, you don't see me complaining, so suck it up, don't tell me about your problems, do your bit, do your part, so we can solve our problem together. You never tell that to this person, especially if they were in a cast, if they were on a hospital bed. You would never do that. But that's because you can see with your own eyes that they are weak, they're in a cast, they're in medical care. So obviously that's not something you tell them to. But then you don't go to somebody whose perception of the world is completely broken and say, why are you crying? Your life is beautiful. Look at all those people in that country dreaming of a life like yours. How dare you be sad? You better stop crying or I'm going to give you something to cry about. Why don't you? You know what? You should feel better because of this reason, because of this reason, because of this reason. All of this logic is not going to work because it's the logic part of their brain that's broken, which is why they're coming to those conclusions they are. What kind of help does that kind of disease need? Well, if it's a bone issue, then they need an orthopedist. If it's a genetic issue, then they need a geneticist. They need supportive care. So if it's some kind of brain logic breaking issue, they need a psychologist or a psychiatrist. They don't need logic. And so don't use logic. So you have somebody, so why am I getting at? With suicide, that is obviously a break in the logic, because the most basic instinct in life is self-preservation. Somebody's coming at you with a knife, your first instinct is to back away, to defend yourself, to fight or run, fight or flight. From the very beginning of life, when one cell, microorganism, tried to run away from another microorganism, self-preservation has been the basic instinct of life. And here is this person concluding that they want to kill themselves. Clearly, the logic is not at play. Instead, then, why am I getting at this? Well, here, let me finally bring it home. Let me finally bring this tangent around. Instead of being careful not to mention suicide to somebody who looks like they are in a bad way, you can ask it. You can ask them, are you thinking of suicide? And what you're doing is not giving them a reason to be happy. Instead, they have somehow, using their faulty logic building blocks, built themselves into a corner, and now they feel trapped. They feel like this option is not available, this path has been locked off, I'm trying to find a way out of this situation, and I can't. It seems like the only path left for me is to kill myself. For you, this trusted, loving friend, confidant, to come forward and say, are you thinking of suicide? You know I care about you. I'm willing to do anything to help you. You are creating a gap in the wall. You are creating a hole in the wall that they built for themselves so that it's a possible exit point, that they can finally get out of this trap, this prison they built for themselves. Or not built for themselves, but was built around them through genetics, through circumstances outside their control. So go ahead, ask if they are. And then if, depending on how they answer, that the details are way beyond the scope of this class, maybe you can it could be a lead that you can follow to take the next step and literally save their life. You can tell that this is a strategy that only should be used by close people who are in a close, intimate relationship with. Not intimate as in sexual, but intimate as in like soulmates, soul for soul. So true best friends, not internet BFFs, but true best friends, soulmates. The two people who deeply respect each other, care about each other, it'll only work. Because if a total stranger or some loose acquaintance shows up and say, are you thinking of suicide? I want you to know I'm there for you. That means nothing. That means nothing. That's about as meaningful as some stranger on the internet sending a text saying, I'm sending you hopes and prayers. Okay, that is absolutely doing nothing but making the person feel targeted. So this has to be used by somebody who really is close before it has any hope of actually being helpful. Okay, so a little bit, this is a public health concepts class, so let's talk about the public health. So like I said, 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 1,000 years ago, when somebody was acting a little differently from the rest of the people in the village, there was, at that time, like 1,000 years ago, the assumption was that they were possessed by an evil spirit. Then very smart people who made the best possible decision with the faulty information they had at the time would logically make the most clearly obvious solution, which is we should make a sacrifice to the temple or find an exorcist to get this evil demon out of them, and then they'd be good as new, right? Well, then time marches on, and then there is this awareness now that, wait a minute, maybe this is a medical issue, not a spiritual issue. And so it's not a reflection on the person's behavior, but it could be something about genetics. So they didn't know genes or DNA yet. They just know that traits run in the family. After all, two tall people have tall children, two dark-haired people have dark-haired children. So that kind of inheritance pattern people have been aware of for a long time. So families started worrying that if the village found out about their child who was acting strange, then the village may think down on the family as a whole. So they would take these children and hide them in the attic, in the basement, hoping that the rest of the village doesn't find out. Okay, but then as the awareness that this might be a medical thing, not so much, and that could be curable, then they started calling for medical healers, not so much the spiritual healers. And then here's the thing. Unlike a broken bone, unlike a rash, unlike other common medical complaints, mental health as a population percentage is kind of rare. It's not that common, at least especially because families tend to hide it, not to admit it. So those who became aware of it and were actually willing to search out for help were few and far between. And so here's the issue. If some healthcare provider, in quotes at the time, which is like 200 years ago, healthcare provider made themselves known as an expert in mental illness, or the crazy people, as they were called 200 years ago, or the insane, as they were called 200 years ago, it's hard to make house calls because like one person in this city, one person in that city. So this healthcare expert, this top subject matter expert, would spend more time traveling than actually taking care of people. Would it be more efficient, more logical to have this doctor stay in one place and bring the insane people in from the outskirts of the countryside? And so yes, and that's called an institution. For those of you who watched old movies about people who are in insane asylums, this is where that idea came from. Can we concentrate experts and patients in one place so we have efficiency of logistics, put them in one place? And then the general public is also very much in favor of it because it, again, takes these uncomfortable truths and hides them away in a building. Then you can paint them with one broad brush, one stereotype you know about mental health, you can apply to everybody in that building. But anyway, the general public was okay with it because it keeps life simple, keeps problems simple. And it takes them away outside, out of sight, out of mind. Okay. Well, like a lot of things, the phrase of the road to hell is paved with good intentions. You make the initial steps because you are motivated out of goodness of will, a feeling you want to help people, but the end result is a dystopian nightmare. Part of it is that as the general public became aware that there are institutions and centers of knowledge and learning where you can take your suffering family member and send them there. So you don't have to hide them in the attic, you don't have to hide them in the basement, you don't have to send them far out into the country to hide them from your neighbors. You can send them there. So as it turns out, mental health is not a very small percentage of the population. It's actually a pretty sizable prevalence in the population. And as more and more families became aware and willing to take their family members and send them to the institutions were getting horribly overcrowded. As patients started coming in from all over the place to numbers and levels that nobody ever expected actually existed. So these institutions became way overcrowded. The funding, the finances that the governments applied were woefully inadequate, and so people were being undertreated, crammed into tight spaces. Staff members through desperation, we're forced to make decisions just out of convenience and practicality, jamming people together. So stories started coming out of these institutions about how horribly those residents, those patients were being treated. Oh, so the state hospitals. I don't know how many of you have know about the Batman superhero comic, and a big part of that story was many of their villains were kept in or came out of the insane asylums. So that is not, obviously, it's a comic book. It's not a scientifically or professionally accurate portrayal of an institution. It's a over dramatization, right? It's a stereotype. There are not that many movies that accurately portray mental health institutions. In fact, I cannot think of a single one. I know of a couple of famous ones, like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which today is recognized as being horribly inaccurate. That's not how they treated the mentally ill, even at the time. But for Hollywood reasons, to sell tickets, they over-dramatize stuff like that. Especially that scene with electroconvulsive therapy. That's not how it's done. They made it look like a medieval torture session. But that was never how it was done, and that's not definitely how it's done nowadays. It has some very real benefits, but to a very narrow definition of people who need it. They don't give it to just anybody. One thing that's definitely not done anymore is the lobotomy, which is to surgically remove sections of the brain that they thought was causing a problem. But that's been since proven to to make the problem worse and not solve anything. Anyway, so these stories of how horribly, here it is. Here, the stories of how horribly residents were treated was making its way out into the general public. And so now there was a cry that these families know their loved ones need help. They know they cannot send them to these institutions, and they wrote letters to their politicians saying, you got to do something for my loved one. This is a slide about continuing and improved research into what does work, what doesn't work. And so finally, out of desperation and societal desperation, maybe a little bit of worry fatigue as well, that the focus on institutions started to wane until finally laws were passed so that the majority of patients are not sent to mental institutions anymore. One major problem, one example of a legal issue is imprisonment. These patients literally did nothing wrong, yet they are sent to a prison-like environment. So isn't that like a violation of the Constitution of the United States? So things like that led the charge on deinstitutionalization. So here's the idea. There's not enough money and staff for these institutions. The residents, the patients need better. And also, one of the better ways to take care of many of these individuals is not to take them out of their nurturing, supportive home environment and put them in this cold, impersonal building where everybody treats them like a stranger. Instead, how about we send them back home where they're surrounded by loved ones who know them and who can take part in their care. So let's deinstitutionalize these residents, send them back out into the community, and the communities will come up with the support, the staffing, the finances, the logistics of taking care of their own. Then this should solve it, right? Right? What happened? So let's set up local community mental health centers instead of state-run asylums in the middle of an island. Let's have every community, every village have their own little mental health community center. See if that works. Well, what usually happens with ideas about money is that the people who used to pay that money stop paying it, and then the people who are supposed to come up with the replacement don't, or don't come up with as much as was advertised, and then the people who are depending on that money get stuck in between without support. And that's actually what happens today. Yes, there are local community mental health centers today, but they cannot cope with the capacity of need. Not only are the former residents of these asylums coming home to find that the local mental health center is overwhelmed by their numbers, but now more people are coming out of the woodwork. More people are being born. The percentage of mental health illness in the general population is actually higher than anybody ever expected. So these local centers are overwhelmed. What happens then to the people who cannot get a spot in it? Well, where do they go instead? And the answer is nowhere. They have nowhere to go. So what does that mean? Where is nowhere? The answer is hospitals, emergency rooms, not psych ERs, but regular ERs, homeless, and jails. After all, if somebody's having a decompensation, so whatever their mental health disorder is, and then they're able to hold it together and be like a member of society, but then they decompensate, and then they act in ways that their neighbors find unacceptable, inappropriate, then the neighbors call 911. And then because they find out it's a psychiatric emergency medical systems call. So I show up, or my colleagues show up in an ambulance, we see that it's a psych job, and we are absolutely untrained for that kind of thing. We spend like max 2 hours out of the entire program, EMT program, max 1 day out of an entire 1 year paramedic program learning about mental health. And that's only about how to keep ourselves safe, how to assess, as in like get vital signs and stabilize for transport. But we don't learn anything about how to talk to them, how to treat them, and absolutely we don't know how to cure them. All we can do is keep them from hurting themselves while we transport to the hospital. They go to the emergency room, the medical emergency room, the medical ER does the ER workup to look for physical medical issues. They find none, and then they call psych consult, so the psychiatrist comes down and they just assess for whether they are a danger to themselves or others, which is not the same as annoying others. The psychiatrist or the psychiatrist consult says they are not a danger to hurt themselves. They don't seem to be a danger to hurt other people, so we cannot legally hold on to them. They are discharged from the emergency room like 4 or 5 hours after we brought them in. Where do they go? Back home. So they go back home, and then they go back to whatever behavior was that was annoying the neighbors, and the neighbors call 911. And then another ambulance, another police car arrive, bring them to the ER, and they just go back around and around. Situation is the same if they are homeless. So like I said, a mental health disorder is when you cannot hold down a job, so you don't get a salary, so you cannot pay your bills, cannot pay the rent, and so you end up homeless. And then that whatever the mental health issue was, it annoys the neighbors, it annoys the bystanders on the streets. They call 911. EMS and police arrive, take him to the ER. The ER discharges them. A few hours later, and then what do? Well, they go back to the place they are familiar with, that they know. So the same place they were before, and then another bystander, another neighbor, another store owner calls 911, and back to the ER they go. It's like we're sending them through this turnstile, this revolving door of street to ER to street to ER. Many times when I'm working on the ambulance, I'd see the same guy like 2 times in the shift, in the 12-hour shift. There were some we started to know by name. They started to know us by name. Hey, Moon, how you doing? Oh, haven't seen you in a while. Yeah, hey, Frank, what's up now? Yeah, okay, come on, back in the ambulance you go. Yeah, I'll see you tonight. And so it causes every person participating in this circuit, frustration. We get frustrated at the system, but none of us know the solution. This is the state of mental health today. Okay. I'm not saying that it's hopeless. People who are way smarter than I am and who have access to way more resources than we know are still working at this, and it's going to be a thing of like 100 steps forward and 99 steps back. But slowly, humanity, our society, our species, is going to work to some kind of a solution that will be workable and sustainable. Just not, I don't think in my lifetime, maybe not yours, but slowly we're making progress. So yes, homelessness, because if it's a mental health disorder, then it interferes with the ability to hold down a job, which means it's hard to get paid, which means it's hard to pay the rent. So there are organizations and efforts to try to find some kind of solution, because once you are homeless, then it's hard to get a job. So there's this vicious cycle. Boomers call it a catch-22. Catch-22 is a slang term from the old days. I guess it doesn't mean anything to you guys now, but it's basically saying you're stuck between a rock and a hard place. You're in a never-ending cycle of illogic, and so like it's in this case it's the mental health disorder prevents you from getting a job, made you lose your home, but you need a home to get a job, and then once you get a home, how do you get a job? So it's this vicious cycle. Organizations like the SAM, HSA is trying to work on a solution that is sustainable, so gets everybody out of this repeating cycle. Not every person with a mental health issue gets violent. So I just want to make that clear. And part of the stereotype of this is, once again, using the old social pattern of you see one example of a category, you assume everybody else in that category is exactly the same. So you see one story in the news or TV or movies about somebody with a mental health disorder becoming violent. You think that everybody with a mental health illness gets violent, and that's absolutely not true. That said, unless you are trained and experienced in these matters, you cannot predict which one will be. So I teach EMTs and paramedics, and I tell, in that short time we have to talk about psychiatric disorders, 2 hours or one lecture, 1 3-hour lecture, I tell them most of the time your psych patient will not be of any risk to you, but once, it only has to happen once in your 20-year career, 2,000 hours a year, full-time, it only happens to happen once to mess up your life. That's an unfortunate reality of it. So you should always be safe, always keep yourself between the patient and the exit, escape route, no matter who it is. I don't care if it's if it's a chest heart attack or a mosquito bite. No matter what the patient is, always keep yourself between the patient and an exit. And if it is a known a person with a psychiatric history, ask a police officer to ride along with you in the ambulance. I'm not saying, again, that violence will happen or could happen, but it only has to happen once in your career to change your life forever. Not only emergency rooms, but now because of this misunderstanding, many psychiatric patients end up in jails. Misunderstanding on the police officer's part, misunderstanding on the neighbor who made the complaint, and the lack of training by all involved to how to deal with this. Hopefully with this new 988 system that they will, out of there will evolve much more helpful, realistic policies and protocols of how to deal with a psychiatric 911 call. Until then, people get misidentified and thrown in jail, not because they are resistant to authority, not because they are naturally violent. It's just that the patient doesn't know what's going on and they are lashing out in self-defense. But again, unless you're trained to deal with these things and trained properly and extensively and have the experience through apprenticeship with a senior leader, then how are you supposed to know? How are you supposed to know the difference? Okay, prevention. Well, the problem now with psychiatric diseases is that we actually don't know what causes them. Humanity, medical science, still doesn't understand what actually causes psychiatric problems, mental health issues. We know the risk factors. We know what goes into the black box and what comes out of the black box. We just don't know what happens inside. So some of the risk factors are, again, genetics. That's unavoidable, as uncomfortable as that is to hear. Absolutely experience or what they've experienced. So you've heard of PTSD. There is what goes into the body, like what you eat, drink, and what you absorb through the skin. Chemicals you put into the body that affect the brain is a risk factor. So there's a lot of risk factors. It's definitely multifactorial. You cannot point to one thing and say that's the cause. If we got rid of that, then there would be no more mental illness in society. Obviously not, right? So if we don't know what caused it, then absolutely we don't know how to fix it, how to prevent it. But because we have awareness of some of the risk factors, we can try to do something about the risk factors, try to diminish the risk factors. So that's the primary. Primary is reduce the risk factors for mental illness. The secondary, remember, is reduce the severity of the disease once it is discovered. So proper diagnosis, proper treatment, and that's things like many of the psychiatric drugs that are taken is a response to noticing that the levels of those chemicals seem to be unusually low in this category of patient compared to the general public. So they give medications to raise those levels up, and it seems to help. But that the fact remains that the changing levels of those neurotransmitters is a symptom of the disease, not a cause of the disease. It's like saying, your blood levels are low, let me give you more blood. That's great, doc, I really appreciate it, but why are my blood levels low? Oh, I don't know. We just know that it's low, so we're going to give you more blood, right? So is that kind of a logic. So we don't know why these neurotransmitters are low in the first place, but we'll give you more. Some people it seems to help, so let's try it on you. That's psychiatric meds. One of these days, they will figure it out. Actually, how the brain works. And that's part of the problem. The reason why we don't know how the brain is broken is because we don't know how the brain works. What do you mean? I know exactly which cell in the brain handles my right arm, which cell in the brain handles my left arm. Yeah, I know. But can you tell me, or can any neurologist or neurosurgeon tell me where in the brain you store the number 1? Point to me where in the brain you store the love that you feel for your mother. Go ahead. Here's a pointer. Here's a laser pointer. Show me. They can't. You go to a computer expert and say, my computer crashed and there's a very important file. I need it tomorrow. I need it tomorrow to file my taxes. Can you do anything? Within 4 hours, that computer expert will find that file, take it out of that shredded hard drive, put it in a thumb drive, give it to you, $100 please, and you gladly pay it. So we know exactly how a computer works. We don't know how the brain works. So we don't know how to fix it because we don't know how it broke. One day they will figure it out. They will figure it out. I don't know, 100 years from now, 1,000 years from now, you walk into a clinic and you say, I have a lot of anger towards my father. I don't, for the record, I just want to say I have no anger to my father. But a hypothetical client says, I have anger towards my father. The therapist will say, please sit here, let me put this cap on you, and then oh, there it is. Here, you want me to delete it for you? And they can do that, and then that's going to revolutionize psychiatric care, mental health. Because now we'll know how the brain works. Then we'll know how it broke, so we'll know how to fix it. Until that day comes, just supportive therapy, really. Respond to the symptoms, treat the symptoms. Some cognitive behavior therapy seems to help, but anyway, that's secondary. And then tertiary is treatment and rehabilitation. Again, remember, tertiary is responding to the side effects of the treatments in the secondary. So if there are any, then work with that too. Okay. So that's it, right? The pharmacology is here. So electroconvulsive therapy, it's kind of like defibrillation in a cardiac arrest. You know how if some people, the heart stops, and certain kinds of reasons why the heart stops, if you put the pads on, you yell clear, you push the button, a shock goes to the heart, and it seems to fix the arrhythmia. So in certain kinds of brain misfunctions, it seems to be that the brain signaling from one side to the other gets confused, and if you send an electrical jolt through it, it seems to like reset, bring it back to like factory settings or something like that. It's the if you've ever had a computer problem and you call tech support and they say, what is the first thing they always say when you call tech support? Surely you've called tech support before. What does the geek on the other end tell you? Have you tried? Turn it on and turn it off and turn it on again. So that's kind of what ECT does. In a very oversimplified way. Okay, psychotherapy is that thing where you lay on the sofa, and then the guy, the doctor or lady, doctor sitting in a chair with a notepad and just helps you think through issues with some very strategic, pointed questions, and then hopefully gets you through that. Okay. The internet has helped modify these therapies because some things can be done on Zoom. Like you don't have to be there in person, especially if it's just talking. Which makes me wonder now, will artificial intelligence take over some of this? If you no longer have to be in the same room with a human being, could you be on a Zoom call with a robot? you know, artificial intelligence is threatening all jobs, not just a few jobs. It's all jobs. Okay. So there is self-help groups like Alcoholics Anonymous, other support groups that it's not necessarily going to cure you, but it's great to know that you're not alone. That at the very minimum, that is so helpful that you have other people going through the same thing. At least they understand you. Okay. So some challenges in the psychiatric community, the psychologic community, the mental health support community there. The staff turnover seems to be kind of high. So that might say something about the kind of work is involved. Mental health is not one disease. It's many, many diseases. Some of them completely unrelated. So it's this one giant umbrella category that is really not fair. But for the needs of this class, we kind of have to do it that way. Okay, we deinstitutionalized for better or worse, but the institutionalization was like too extreme on one direction. The society today has kind of gone too extreme in the other direction. The pendulum has swung back the other way. It is too decentralized. It is now so fragmented. It's hard to get better organization as a result. Okay, and then since many frontline or first responder agencies are not properly trained in these matters, then their behavior on the scene is not always the best, the most efficient, the most optimal, depending on the kind of complaint problem it has. Okay, so some of the so here is an example of society becoming more aware of mental health and treating it as seriously as other medical